Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. This is the I think this is the third class in the book Riyadh al-Salihin, loosely translated as the gardens of the righteous. The gardens of the righteous, the different ways that the people who are righteous could act and serve, worship in order to achieve, arrive at the end of their life in the paradise. Written by Al-Imam Al-Mujaddid Al-Muhaddith Al-Faqih Imam Abi Zakaria Ibn Ismail Al-Sharf Al-Nawawi Rahimahullah Ta'ala. And may Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala bless the Imam tremendously for his contribution and enter him to one of the highest levels of Allah's pleasure on the day of judgment. I mean, the last hadith we took, and we stopped at the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, which is in the Bukhari and Muslim. لا هجرة بعد الفتح. There's no hijrah after the conquest of Mecca. ولكن جهاد ونية. وإذا استنفرتم فانفروا. متفق عليه. And when everybody retreats, then you all retreat together. Not some of you leave the others behind. And this is the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim. Tonight we're going to take, inshallah ta'ala, the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And we'll take also the hadith which is talking about the same concept, Bab al-Niyya, or Bab al-Ikhlas al-Niyya, the concept of having a good idea, a good action you want to do, and keeping the reason behind you doing it, keeping it unadulterated, keeping it focused. This is the best way to explain ikhlas. Sometimes we explain them in a traditional, translated way that they may not fit in English, they may not meet the requirements to really be relative, but ikhlas, we normally say purity or sincerity. And the scholars, when they talk about ikhlas, sincerity, I remember Shaikh Razak explaining this, who's from our scholars alive today. They said ikhlas can't be a concept or a thing achieved without siddiq. Siddiq. So ikhlas, they say sincerity. And siddiq is truthfulness. So the Shaykh is saying they're synonymous. You can't have sincerity without being truthful. And you can't have truthfulness without being sincere. So take sincerity and underline it and put underneath sincerity purity, unadulterated, truthfulness, focus, not mixing your priorities. That's the best word to say, al-ikhlas. So here this chapter is Bab al-Ikhlas. chapter that's talking about purity, truthfulness, keeping your goals focused and knowing why you are doing it. And this is also the concept of niyyah, because niyyah is your aim, niyyah is your purpose, niyyah is your, they say, intention. They like that word. What does that mean? It means your purpose, why you are doing it, what you're trying to obtain from the matter at hand. What's the objective? What you're trying to reach as an outcome, like this. What and why is your decision this and not that? So this hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah, some people call him Jabir. No, it's Jabir. Jabir ibn Abdullah, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He said, كنا في غزوة مع النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. He said, we were on a expedition with the Prophet. Ghazwa means they're going out, traveling, and they're going to meet the opposition. They're going to meet some people that they have to deal with politically, physically, religiously, spiritually, and it could result in some type of battle, physically fighting, or it could result in some type of agreement to not fight. It could be some type of dialogue, ghazwa. So it said, and the Prophet mentioned while they were out on the trip, he said, in the Medina Aqwaman, he said, and verily there's some people back home. So imagine you go out on a trip. We're together. It's a serious type of venture. And then someone says to you as the leader, there's some people back home in your hometown. There's some people back home in your country. There's some people back home in the state that you live in. There's some people back home in the city, the town, the village, your neighborhood. He said, those people, habasahum habas. Habasatahum habas. Habas is something that restricts you. Habas in Arabic means something that has you restrained and has you unable to do something. That's why when we talk about fasting, they said as-sawm bima'na habas. Fasting means to restrain. Fasting means to restrict. Habas nafs. Habas, restrict. Habas, restrain. Habas, control. Habas, nafs. Habas nafs, to restrain, to restrict, to control oneself. So the Prophet said, habasahum marad. In one narration, sickness kept them from coming. Habasahum habas. They have some things that restricted them from coming, in other words. The Prophet said, those people back home that have this thing that prevented them, sickness, he said, in another wording, shabakukum fil ajr. They're going to share in the reward despite them not being with you. They're going to share in the reward although they are not here. They're going to share in the reward although they have been restricted, they have been disabled, they have been deprived, they have been kept from coming on this trip. And the Prophet ﷺ said this because the point is that if people, again, they have a thing they want to do, and the thing is focused, it's not mixed, it's purely an intention or an aim or a decision to do something, in this case, that's considered pleasing Allah. In this case, that's in the category considered al-ibadah, which is, we loosely say, worship. We want to underline worship. We want to take this term and branch it out. So worship, right? Worship, draw a line under worship, and then you put servitude. Then draw another line and put internal. Draw another line and put external. So you have worship being servitude, internal, external. Internal, how you feel. External, the physical part that's part of that servitude. Then you draw another line that's coming from the word worship, like a drop down. You have worship, a line. You have one line on the left, servitude. Then you draw another line on the servitude, going to the left, internal. Another line on the servitude, like a V, going to the right, and you put external. Then you draw another line from worship, coming straight down, next to servitude, next to the two drop downs, internal, external, you put pleasurable by Allah, or what Allah is pleased with. That's worship. And you draw another line from worship besides what Allah is pleased with or pleasurable by Allah, and you put that Allah loves. That Allah loves. Allah, He loves it. He doesn't despise it. He doesn't hate it. He doesn't dislike it. He loves it. It makes Him happy with you. It makes Him subhanahu wa ta'ala joyful. Then you put another line on the worship, drop down, next to He loves it, and put any action. Any action. And this is the breakdown of worship. The Shaikh was Islam he said, Al-Ibadah huwa ismu jami'. Al-Ibadah, servitude. Huwa ismu jami'. It is a comprehensive. It is a general. Jami' means plural. Compact. All-inclusive. Widely understood. Ismul Jami', a thing that is comprehensive and it is all-inclusive. Something that is a unified, universal concept. لِكُلِّ مَا يُحِبُّ اللَّهُ or يَرْضَى, of everything that Allah يُحِبُّ, He loves, or يَرْضَى, and that He is pleased with. So that's why we said from the beginning things that were pleasurable by Allah, or things that Allah is pleased with. And then we said things that Allah He loves, He likes, and makes Him happy. When you do it, doesn't make Him upset, He doesn't dislike it, He does not disdain it. Then Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah said, Min aqwalin. Aqwal, plural of qawl. Qawl, statement. Aqwal, statements. Sentiments. Phrases. Wal af'al. Af'al, plural. Actions. Plural fi'l. Fi'l, action. Af'al, actions. Then here's the internal, external. Batinin, inward, internal. Wallah, and that which is external, which you can see. So this is the thing when we talk about doing the action. In this case, Rasulullah, he said, habas, something restricted them. Or fi riwayatin habasahum mara, sickness befell them. Or fi riwayatin sharakukum fil ajr, they will share in the reward like you. Why? Because they have pure objection. They have a pure objective. The wrong word came out. Objective. Yeah, they had a pure goal. They wanted to do something, not to show off, not to be praised, not to earn favor from the Prophet, not to get some worldly gain. No, they wanted to do it. It was the right thing to do. Allah wanted them to do it. That's it. He loved it. He's pleased with it. And they were inwardly, internally doing it, happily, willingly, and outwardly. They were doing the actions like riding, walking, carrying their things, sweating. This is the clear, pure ibadah. So here, Salah mentioned point number 1. There are some people back home, if they could be with you, they would. In sincerity and purity of action. Point number 2. Something prevented them. Something prevented them. And point number 3. This is something that they would normally do. Something they would normally do. Come on the trip. Come on the expedition. Point number 4. Because they used to do it on the regular, sincerely and purely, to obey Allah, to be rewarded by Allah, to make the difference, because Allah told them, then they will share in the reward, although they're not here. That's point number 4. Sharakukum fil ajr. They will share in the reward. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he also mentioned in another wording hadith of Anas, he said, there's not a person that due to marad al-safar, because of sickness or travel, that they used to do something and they can't do it. Prophet said, kana lahu, that person will have kana lahu ajru mithlu ma kana muqiman sahihan. That person will have the same reward who's restricted from doing the thing they normally do. If they're sincere, this is the chapter and the whole thing to get out of the story, being sincere and truthful and why you're doing that action and what you plan to get out of it. If they plan to do the action because Allah, He loves it, He's pleased with it. If they plan to do the action to make the difference and to be a service to Allah's religion and to the people, to be rewarded by Allah. If they plan to do it for no other reason, and they are prevented because of sickness or travel. Sometimes you travel and you can't do what you normally do because travel wears you out. Sometimes you're sick and the sickness is to the point it won't allow you to do the things that you used to do temporarily or permanently. Then the Prophet said, kana lahu, for that one who's prevented, mithlu, kana lahu mithlu ma ya'malu muqiman sahihan. Then he will get the reward like what he used to do when he was at home. Muqiman, he's home, he's local. Sahihan, and he's healthy. Because these are two things that's the topic of discussion. Sickness preventing you and being away, traveling prevents you. So this is the hadith of Jabir bin Abdullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And some examples of this, like for example, if a person used to pray in the masjid, in congregation, but he's sick, so he can't go to the masjid. He ends up praying alone at home. Or the person used to visit the sick on a regular, but now he can't visit the sick on the regular because he's sick. Or that person used to fast on Monday and Thursday, or that person used to do some good deed, like take his wife and children every week somewhere special, special time just for them. Or that person used to travel on a regular to visit so and so, or go to this particular place to feed the poor, or go to this particular place to do a charity act, or anything that's considered, again, something that Allah He loves, He's pleased with. And that thing is done purely to make a difference, purely to gain the recognition and reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Prophet said that person will have that reward like when that person was able to do it when they were muqiman, back home, not traveling for the traveler, and sahihan, well, not sick like the one who was restricted and prevented because of sickness. The Shaikh, he gave examples, Imam Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala, of the salah. Assalamu alaikum. The salah, he gave example of the salah. Because again, when a person is sick, can't go out, pray in the jama'ah. Based on this hadith, the Shaikh said that person will have his 27 degrees or 27 salah for each salah, although he's praying alone because he used to make the salah in the congregation. That person can't fast. He's sick. Oh, sorry, Mike. But that person will have a reward like he fasts if he normally fasts. That person will have the reward for doing many actions. So as long as they used to do it on a regular basis, with sincerity, with pureness of intent, and a objective in mind to give a servitude to Allah and to serve the religion, to serve the people, then that person will get that reward although they were prevented because of sickness, because of travel, or some other thing that's circumstantial that prevents that person. Now, well, this is a very important point. Then we'll move to the next hadith. Next to hadith is a very important point. And that is, again, for the one who normally does an action, be it something that's an obligation or something that's recommended or voluntarily. You normally do it. Number one, again, it's something that Allah He loves, He's pleased with. How do we know Allah He loves it? How do we know Allah is pleased with it? Because He commands you to do it. So any commandment to do something like praying 5 times a day, Allah He loves it. How do you know He's pleased with it? Because if He loves something, He's also pleased with it. That's what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about Allah, His love, and His pleasure. Likewise, if it's something that is recommended, Allah recommends it for you. Again, He loves it, and if He loves it, He's pleased with it. Likewise, if it's something that's allowed, if you do it, you'll be rewarded. If you don't do it, there's no sin on you. It's okay. For example, the issue of sleeping, eating, and drinking. These are allowable things, meaning Allah hasn't commanded you. You have to eat, you have to drink, you have to sleep, like an act of what we will call worship. These are customary things. They are things that Allah has made that you have to do to survive. So when you eat, where you eat, what you eat, those are different things that's connected. But the issue of eating and drinking, they're customary. Allah didn't necessarily say, eat this many times a day, or eat this portion, or don't eat that portion. That's up to you. Sleeping. Yes, the body needs sleep. The law doesn't necessarily tell you sleep at this time, don't sleep at that time, sleep this many hours. If you sleep over that amount of hours, that's a sin on you. If you don't get this amount of sleep, these many hours, I'll be upset. It's not like that. So these categories, what Allah commands you, what He recommends, and what's just open, if you do it, it's allowed, it's okay. Any of those actions that you do on the regular, if you're prevented because of circumstance. One of the circumstances the Prophet mentioned here is sickness prevention. Travel is another circumstance. Sometimes travel will prevent you because it is out of your element. You may need to be home to do that thing. You can't do it when you are away from home. The travel may, in fact, tire you out or restrict you because of depletion of energy or funds, or something in that category. Then, as long as it was a regular practice, the Prophet said you will get that reward, just like when you were well for the sick one, and just like when you were local home for the traveler, and you did that action, Allah will automatically reward you the likeness of that action, although you prevented. One of the things that's in this category is very important, fast of Ramadan. Because many people, because of sugar diabetes, wallahi, they cannot fast. And I remember, and like I said, we'll go to the next two hadith quickly. One brother, he was crying, I remember. He said, I can't fast. He said, I feel like a munafiq, like a hypocrite, or I feel like someone who's not even a Muslim. So what he means is everybody's fasting. I can't fast because I take insulin. And the way that I have to take the insulin, I can't fast with the insulin because I have to take it at a certain time, which would break my fast. And for the record, you cannot take insulin and continue your fast. Insulin will break your fast. Why? Because it's an issue of nutrition, nourishment entering the body. Anything that enters the body that's a nourishing factor, sugar is a nourishing factor. It's like iron, it's like zinc, it's like vitamin C, it's like magnesium, just like the B12 complex, vitamin D, C, A, all of these things, water, salt, and then of course we're talking about sugar. So we can't take that insulin and fast. So the brother was destroyed to the point he got emotionally cried. He said in Ramadan, people praying Tarawih, the prayer in Ramadan after Isha, the night prayer is called Tarawih. I can't pray that because my hours, I work from 5 to 1 in the morning. He said, so I miss everything. It's like it's not even Ramadan for me. I said, Ahi, but you can feed people. Allah Azza wa Jal gave you, for the one who's fasting and sick, something you still have to do. You have to feed the people. Do the fidya, substitution, feeding the people. For each day you don't fast. But he forgot this hadith. Allah Azza wa Jal also would reward him. Although the feeding the people was a special thing that Allah gave you, you have to do something in Ramadan. You can't just not do it because you've been prevented and get something. You have to do something. But the concept of still getting that same reward, although you're prevented, is part of the reality of Ramadan. It's part of the reality, you see. And if that person is so poor, guess what? That they can't feed a person each day for the day that they miss the fasting in Ramadan, then they have been given a pass by Allah because everything is based on your ability. And we know this from the man who needed to do something because he fell victim to having intercourse with his wife in the daytime of Ramadan purposely. He had a special thing to do to get that sin off, and he was not able to do any of them. The Prophet gave him some great amount of dates to eat. He said, go home and give this to your family, meaning sharing this with your wife, eating this with your wife is considered an act of charity, and it will suffice for the thing that you must do to atone for that sin. So there's always some way to get credit for what you normally do if you're restricted. In this case, the Prophet said automatically if you're prevented from something because of sickness or travel, then if you used to do it on a regular, and it's something of goodness, and it's something that Allah is pleased with and loves, then if you're doing it sincerely, to be recognized, rewarded, blessed by Allah, to be a service for the religion of the people, then you will get the reward like you did the action, although you're not able to, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in this hadith. We also have the next hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning about, again, the issue of reward, intention. A hadith of Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He said that there was a man by the name of Abi Yazid. And Abi Yazid, he had some wealth. He wanted to give to charity. He wanted to give something that can be considered for him that he gave to get a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something that Allah encouraged in the Quran, giving in open and secret. Giving in open and secret. Open means you give the money, you give the wealth, you give the car, you give the clothes, you give the plane ticket to Hajj, you give the tools to fix the house or the masjid, you buy the carpet openly. And this is okay because it encourages others. As one time some people came to the Prophet ﷺ to visit from a place, they traveled not far from Al-Medina. And the Prophet he said that their clothes were like tattered. You could tell they were very poor. And so the Prophet stood up, in front of the people, and he said, when we give to our brothers, when we give them those who are in need, and so the first one to give was a person who had dates. He took some dates he had, put them in this cloth, and then people just started giving everything they had. Dates, wealth, clothes, and like this. So this real concept, competing to give, and one of the reasons you give, and one of the reasons you compete is to encourage one another. So the concept of giving openly from Al-Islam. Also giving in secret. Giving in secret because that person does not want to be acknowledged. That person wants to make sure that he or she or they are anonymous because they don't want to be praised. And sometimes people will praise you, oh wow, man, you gave $5,000, subhanAllah. Other times people will come and line up. He gave 5,000, I need 5,000, I need 5,000. Now you got a long line of people like this. Fitna, big problem. So people, they give in open and secret. So in this case, this man, Abi Yazid, was given that which was in secret. He took it to the masjid the person who was the person in the masjid that was known and trusted, he said, listen, anybody comes that you see fit, anybody comes that's in need, give this charity to them. And Abi Yazid, he left. Who are some of the people that can go and get charity? Give me 3 people that fall in the category that they are eligible in Al-Islam for charity.
Miskin.
Miskin, what that mean?
Poor.
Poor, mashallah. So, he said miskin, the poor. Can I be a doctor in America, heart surgeon, have the loan, ES, Benz, a house, it costs almost $1 million, heating coils in the floor of my bathroom that my floor is warm underneath to have the heat, in the floor. Can I be that kind of person and be considered eligible for zakat?
No.
No. Give me another person that's considered a person eligible for zakat. And Omar.
The person who is traveling but doesn't have access to his money.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Abir Sabil, hakada. The one who's passing through is a traveler. And he may have depleted his wealth. He may have spent all he had. Maybe he thought this is sufficient. Like when I went to Gambia, I had 4G, $4,000. Real money, not counterfeit, not monopoly. $4,000. 2 months, and I never thought that was going to happen. In fact, some of that money was for something else. It was very important. And Allah Musta'an, it was spent. One necessity, not blowing this and that. They didn't come back with bags of clothes like some of the brothers used to do back in the 90s. Talib al-Ilm, can't read Arabic, barely read. He goes and builds a humongous maktaba. Tafsir al-Kathir, Tafsir Tabari, Sahihain, Qutub al-Sitta. It looks good. Go to this house, wow, it's for library. We didn't do that. All type of fancy jewelry, necessity, food, medicine, transportation for a doctor. So it's easy for a person to deplete their wealth unexpectedly when you travel, because you spend more when you're away from home than when you are home. One more person that in the category able to receive some charity. What about your own family member? Your own family member.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Hey. So this Hadith Abi Yazid, as we wind down, Barakallahu Fikum, he has a son named Ma'an. And so Ma'an went to the masjid. And the man seen the young boy, and the young boy said, I'm hungry. And so the caregiver has this amana. He has this responsibility. He said, anybody who comes, who needs some charity, who was eligible, worthy, whoever you see that's needy, give this to him. So he gave the bag of money to the boy. So now the boy, he goes home with the bag of money. And his father, he tells him, I got this bag of money from the masjid. And the boy is happy. So the boy, his father said, hey, I didn't intend on you getting that. You can't have that. I gave that to that person in the masjid to give to somebody in charity. You're my son. And so they went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the Prophet to judge between them. Point number one. The ulama, they said this hadith is a proof that the son of the child and the parents can go and should go before the judge when having disputes to solve the internal disputes. Now, point number 2. The Prophet ﷺ told Abu Yazid, he said, Laka nawaita ya Aba Yazid. What you aimed to do, you did. You took it, you gave the wealth in a bag to the man to distribute. He said, وَلَكَ مَا أَخَفْتَ يَا مَعَانِ. He said, and what you took, O son of Abi Yazid, Ma'an, that's for you, you got it. So, point number 2 was that, this hadith shows that the parent or a person can give wealth to the close relatives and it be considered zakat. Does not prohibit you because it's your son, in this case your daughter, your wife, your parents, that you can't give them or that they can't take from the wealth you have. That's considered sadaqah. No, you can give charity. In fact, Salafi mentioned حتى لقمة تنفق فيه في فم امرأته ابتغاء بها وجه الله. He said, even, and this is very precise, the Prophet said, even down to the morsel. Luqma means a piece of something you're eating. It could be a small piece of bread. It could be a grain of rice, a piece of a portion of meat. It could be a vegetable, a luqma, general. It said even the smallest or the least amount of food, that's the best way to say luqma, that you put in the mouth of your amra'atin. Amra'atin here means your wife. It could mean physically, you give her a grape. It could be physically, you say, taste this honey. Or it could mean you brought it and she eats it. It's as if you put it in her mouth because you spent. The Prophet said, spending, seeking the reward of Allah. This term, seeking the reward of Allah, it's coined as sadaqah. Spending, nafaqah, ibtigha, biha, wajh Allah. You seek and buy it, Allah's pleasure. Remember, we said again in the beginning, if it is something that is considered, number 1, what Allah Azza wa Jal has commanded you. Number 2, or He recommends. Number 3, or it's just open, you can do it or not do it, it's allowed. If it's considered in that category from anything. Number 4, it's something that you're doing with a reason to gain Allah's love or His pleasure. Something that Allah clearly He loves and that He's pleased with. If He tells you to do it, He loves it. And if He loves it, He's pleased with it. And if He's pleased with it, He loves it. He allows you to do it, He loves it. And if He loves it, He's pleased with it. And if He recommends you to do it, He loves it. He's pleased with it. And if that Allah is pleased with it, He loves it. And then it's internal or external. Internal, a feeling. Internal, a thought. Internal, an idea. Internal, a plan. Here. External, physically, something you say, something you do, something you contribute. If it's any of those things, that's what's considered ibadah. And from amongst the things of ibadah, in this hadith, a man is allowed to give sadaqah even to his own family, like in this hadith, Abi Yazid. He gave the charity and his son was the one who reaped that charity, the benefit of it from the masjid. And they went to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet said, what you set out to do, you did, and you were rewarded for that. And what your son, received, he went to get charity, and he got it, and it's okay. It didn't stop you from getting your reward, Abi Yazid, because of what you aimed to do and how you did it. And these are the two hadith, the hadith of the Prophet that is the first hadith we took of Jabir ibn Abdullah. Jabir ibn Abdullah, where the Prophet said there were some people back home, they were sharing in the reward because they were prevented because of sickness. They were sharing in the reward, meaning they used to do that thing on a regular. Now they were prevented because of sickness or travel. And the Prophet said they are sharing in that reward with you. And the second hadith of Hadith Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, that Abi Yazid gave charity, and the son was the one who got that charity. And the Prophet said one didn't have anything with preventing the other from reward. The one who gave it, Abi Yazid, he gets what he set out for the reward, and his son, although he took it didn't prevent that, and that charity for the son that he took was okay and acceptable, and he got what he sought to get. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبد الله ورسوله وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والحمد لله رب العالمين. Any questions around the topic of those two hadith?
So there's another hadith I had in mind, and can you inform me if it is completely separate from these, or is it somewhat related? Because ironically, I was trying to quote a hadith earlier to my mother, and I told her I was gonna ask you about it like maybe 6 hours ago.
Is it the same topic? It was different.
It's the same topic. Well, you could determine that, but I think it is similar. So basically, a father said when he dies, he's not giving his kids anything. He's going to leave it all to the masjid. So that's what even brought my mind to the hadith of giving your family is sadaqah. But I was paraphrasing to my mother, so I was saying I was going to ask you, because I didn't know if I was butchering it up, because I was more so thinking the hadith when the guy came to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and remember the Prophet was saying, feed somebody poor, and he was saying, like, who's more poor than me and my family?
Yeah, that's a separate hadith though.
Okay.
But this one you asked
This one is
about.
actually more on point though.
Okay, so I think what you're asking about, if this is the right hadith, the hadith of, we mentioned this last dars, the hadith of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. He was sick in Hajj al-Wada. And some brothers, they asked me, did he die? Because this was the image of the hadith, like he was on his deathbed, because that's what he said to the Prophet, I'm sick. And he was sick. He said, I only have one child. He said, so, I want to leave, a certain amount of my wealth. Can I leave this meaning to the people? 2/3. And the Prophet said, no, can't leave 2/3. He just told him straight out, no. Sometimes we're afraid to say no. We think it's rude.
Yeah.
We worry about, hurting people's feelings. The Prophet didn't worry about that. He said no. Then he said, okay. After he told him no 2/3, he said, well, what about, this? Going to give half. Because which one is bigger? 2/3 is more, and then half is less than 2/3. The Prophet said no. Then he said, well, what about 1/3? Can I give 1/3 of my wealth away? And the Prophet said, well, full of kathira. He said 1/3, and even 1/3 is a lot. Then the Prophet told him, he said, you can give 1/3 away. That's the most you can give, he said, because it will be better. Now remember, he started with 2/3. So imagine he gave 2/3 away. He only has 1/3.
Yeah.
Then he wanted to give half. Now the Prophet, he asked, can I give a third away? So the prophet told him, you can give a third away. But him giving a third away leaves him 2/3 for that only child. So it was more worried about giving a great portion away because it has one child, thinking I need more people to, give, rather than thinking I need to give most of this to who I have behind, even though it would be one person, than to give most of it in charity. So this shows his understanding was similar to the other hadith we brought, that if you leave something for your family, it's not necessarily charity. He wants to do more for charity. So the prophet told him it would be better to leave that wealth to your loved ones, the close ones, than to have them after your death with their hands out begging. Some ulama, they said one of the stronger words of the hadith means to inherit, because charity is really when you're alive. He was talking about leaving it after his death, which is part of inheriting, urith. So there's a difference between what you give when you're alive and what you give, you leave, the person gets after you die. But the concept was clear. He was concerned about giving charity and wanted to give most of it away to some people or the poor, as opposed to leaving that same money to a close one and giving the reward for charity. So that hadith, I believe, is what you're talking about. Yes, in our case, we wouldn't leave, the money to the masjid. Maybe you would. Allahu A'lam. Back then they would give it to the poor, or give it to the prophet to give to the poor, so like this. But these hadith, they establish many things, and one of them is that just because the person is related to you don't mean that you can't give it. Number two, doesn't mean it won't be considered charity. And number three, doesn't mean that it has to be someone who's outside of your family that you give it to get credit for charity. Like again, a wife. So, well, that's my wife. Yeah, but guess what? Everything you spend, and this, look at the mercy of Allah. You're in a relationship. You are the one who was the provider. You are the one, the caregiver, the caretaker, the management of the house, and all of that's on you as the leader. And still and all of that can be written down for you as charity. That's amazing. It's like everything you do, imagine you can write it off. Your gas, your snacks, your rent, your lights, your car insurance, your cell phone bill, your clothes, your leisure expenditure, your vacation, your everything in the society, you could just write it off and get all that money back. That's similarly, Allah's telling you whatever you spend on your family, that thing will be waiting for you in the hereafter. You say, wow, what's all of those, piles of deeds? You're looking like a map, wow, I did all of that. You really did that many deeds. I said, no, that's the charity you spent. You said, but I don't remember giving that much charity. But you were married for 25 years, and all that time, whatever you spent on your wife, it's in the category of charity. Amazing. And brothers don't want to spend on their wives. Allah most time. So this, is the benefit of the likes of these hadith. And also, again, even you have an issue with your parents, it's best to go get it solved. Don't let it become internal fighting. Don't let it become, well, I'm the father, give it back to my gave, you have no right. No, go get some type of representation and solve the problem, because it may not be the way that you see it. Now, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.